The moment Ethan Walker stepped out of his car, he knew something was wrong. The street looked the same quiet suburban, lined with maple trees turning orange under the early evening sky. But the feeling in his chest told him this was not the welcome he had imagined during the 6-hour drive from Chicago. He stood there for a second, keys still in his hand, staring at the front porch of the house he had called home for most of his life. 3 black garbage bags sat neatly by the door. They were clean, tied carefully, not ripped or messy. That detail made his stomach tighten. Someone had taken time with them. Someone had decided. Ethan walked closer, each step slower than the last. His heart beat hard, like it was trying to warn him. When he reached the porch, he crouched and opened the top bag just enough to see inside. His clothes folded. Familiar. The jeans he wore on his first day of college. The gray sweater his mother once said made him look older. A few books, their covers bent in ways he recognized. This wasn't trash. This was his life. He straightened up and looked at the door. The white paint was the same, but the lock looked newer. The welcome mat was gone. The small crack in the step was still there, but everything else felt empty. Ethan knocked. No answer. He knocked again, louder this time, then tried the handle. Locked. A strange calm washed over him, the kind that comes right before panic. He checked his phone, thinking maybe he had missed a message. There was nothing. No call, no warning. He dialed his mother's number. Straight to voicemail. "Hey, Mom," he said, forcing his voice to stay steady. "I'm home. Call me back." He hung up and waited a moment, then called again. Nothing. The air felt colder now. A breeze moved through the trees, making the wind chime by the porch ring softly. That sound used to mean comfort. Now it felt cruel. Ethan sat down on the step, his suitcase beside him. The garbage bags lined up like proof of a decision he had never been included in. His name was written on one bag in black marker. Ethan. Just his name. No note, no explanation. He pressed his palms together and tried to breathe. He told himself there had to be a reason. Maybe a mistake. Maybe his mother had gone out for groceries. Maybe someone was playing a joke that went too far. But deep down, he knew better. He noticed movement across the street. A neighbor's curtain shifted, then stilled. People saw. People always saw moments like this. They just didn't step in. Ethan stood up and paced the porch, anger starting to rise beneath the shock. He thought about the last phone call with his mother. Short, polite, she had said she was busy. He had said classes were hard, but good. They had both pretended everything was fine. Now he wondered how long this had been planned. He checked the bags again. Everything important was there, but not everything. The family photos. His childhood trophies. The small things that told a story. Those were gone. His phone buzzed suddenly, making him jump. Unknown number. "Hello." He answered quickly. There was a pause. "Ethan?" A man's voice said. "This is Mark, stepfather." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Where is my mom?" Another pause. Longer this time. "She moved," Mark said. "We sold the house." "You sold the house." Ethan repeated, disbelief turning into anger. "Without telling me." "It happened fast," Mark said, sounding tired. "We assumed you'd understand." "Assumed." "And my stuff?" Ethan asked. "You couldn't even wait for me to come back." "We packed what we could," Mark replied. "You're an adult now, Ethan. You'll figure it out." The line went dead. Ethan stared at his phone, his hands shaking. Adult? Figure it out. Words that sounded responsible but felt like an excuse. He didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, he felt hollow, like something had been pulled out of him without permission. That was when he heard footsteps on the driveway. Ethan. He turned. Lena Parker stood there holding a bag of groceries, her eyes wide with confusion that quickly turned into concern. She had lived next door since forever. She was the person who knew his routines, his moods, his silences. She followed his gaze to the garbage bags, then back to his face. "Oh," she said softly. "Ethan, what happened?" He tried to answer, but the words tangled in his throat. He shook his head once. Lena set the groceries down and stepped closer. "You don't have to explain," she said. "Come inside." "At least for now." Ethan hesitated. He hadn't planned to see her like this. He hadn't planned any of this. But standing there alone felt worse. He picked up one of the bags. "Just for a little while," he said. Lena nodded. "As long as you need." They walked toward her house, the porch light already on, the door opening easily. Warm air met him, and with it a memory of safety he hadn't realized he missed. Before stepping inside, Ethan looked back at the empty house one last time. It didn't look angry. It didn't look sad. It just didn't look like it was his anymore. And that hurt more than he expected. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains of Lena's living room, soft and warm, casting long lines across the floor where Ethan sat quietly, sipping a cup of tea he wasn't really tasting. His mind was still tangled with the image of his home, the white door, the neat black garbage bags, the absence of the life he had expected to return to. Every fiber of his being ached with confusion and loss. He had never imagined that coming home from college would feel like stepping into someone else's world. Lena moved around the kitchen, humming lightly as she prepared breakfast, the smell of pancakes and coffee filling the space. Ethan watched her, feeling a strange comfort in her presence. As if by just being near her, he could anchor himself amid the chaos. It was strange. He had always seen her as his neighbor, his friend from childhood. But now she seemed like a lifeline, a tether to something real when his world had been uprooted overnight. "Ethan," Lena said finally, placing a plate of pancakes in front of him. "Your mom. She moved out last month." Ethan's fork froze midair. "What?" His voice was sharper than he intended, filled with disbelief. "She didn't tell you?" Lena asked gently, eyes full of regret. "She and Mark, your stepdad, they decided to separate. She sold the house. I thought you knew." He shook his head slowly, the weight of the news settling like bricks in his chest. "No, she didn't call. She didn't text. She didn't even leave a note. Nothing." The words sounded smaller in his ears than they felt inside. For a moment, he wanted to scream, but the emptiness left his voice hollow. Lena sat beside him, careful not to crowd him, yet close enough that her presence was grounding. "Sometimes people think leaving quietly will hurt less," she said softly. "They're usually wrong." Ethan stared at the floor, feeling the sting of abandonment more deeply than he had ever felt anything. All those nights he had imagined coming home, laying his keys on the counter, walking into the familiar smell of home, seeing the photos on the walls, talking to his mom about everything that had happened since he left. They were gone, replaced by silence and absence. "I thought coming home would mean being safe," he admitted quietly, almost to himself. "I thought I'd be okay." Lena put a hand on his arm, warm and steady. "Home isn't always a place," she said. "Sometimes it's a person who stays. Someone who's willing to wait for you no matter what." Her voice had a calm certainty that made him want to believe her. For the first time in hours, Ethan allowed himself to breathe a little deeper. The anger and confusion still lingered, but the comfort of Lena's presence gave him a place to start sorting through the feelings that were otherwise too heavy to carry alone. He realized he hadn't just lost a house, he had lost the life he had counted on. The routines and small certainties that had shaped his world. They spent the morning talking, not about blame, not about the past, but about small things: college, his classes, the little victories and frustrations he had faced since leaving. Lena listened quietly, asking questions, offering insights, letting him speak without judgment. It was strange how safe it felt to talk, how normal, even when his entire life had been appended. By late afternoon, Ethan had packed the few bags he had brought with him back into his car. The idea of leaving Lena's house felt uncomfortable. He didn't want to walk out and face this emptiness again, but staying wasn't possible either. He needed a plan, a way forward, even if he didn't know what it looked like yet. "Where will you go?" Lena asked, her voice careful, measured. She wasn't asking because she expected him to move in next door. She was asking because she cared. "I don't know," he admitted. "I don't have anywhere right now. Mom, she didn't leave me anything." No explanation, no direction, nothing. His words trembled slightly, betraying the rawness of his emotions. "You don't have to know today," Lena said, her eyes steady on his. "Take your time. Figure out what's next. You're not alone, Ethan." Her words struck him more than any explanation could have. The house, the neighborhood, the lost home, it didn't matter as much as the presence of someone who cared enough to stand beside him. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ethan allowed himself to imagine a future that wasn't defined by loss. A future where he could rebuild piece by piece. The day faded into evening, and they stepped outside for a moment, breathing in the crisp air. Ethan glanced back toward the empty lot where his home had stood, now a shadow of memories. It was gone, but the feelings it stirred were still alive: grief, confusion, and a strange sense of liberation. He didn't know what his mother's reasons were or why she had acted this way. But he realized that dwelling on it endlessly wouldn't bring back what he had lost. He could only move forward. Lena stood beside him, her shoulder brushing his lightly, and Ethan felt a connection that went beyond friendship. It was a quiet understanding, a bond forged not by shared happiness, but by shared presence in times of uncertainty. In that moment, he realized that some endings make space for beginnings, and this might be the beginning he didn't know he needed. They walked back to her house, the evening sky turning golden, and Ethan felt a flicker of hope he hadn't experienced in days. He didn't have answers. He didn't have closure. But he had someone who cared, someone willing to be there without judgment or expectation. That realization, small as it seemed, was enough to start healing. Inside, Lena made him sit while she fixed a light dinner. They laughed quietly over small mistakes in the kitchen, shared stories from their childhood, and reminisced about the days when life had felt simpler. Each word, each laugh, helped Ethan reclaim a part of himself he had thought lost. That night, as he lay on the couch, listening to the quiet hum of Lena's house, he allowed himself to rest. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, they were still there, but they were no longer unbearable. For the first time since arriving home, he felt a small measure of peace. He realized that being uprooted didn't mean he had to be lost forever. By morning, Ethan had decided he would face the world again, one step at a time. He didn't know what the future held, whether he would reconcile with his mother or find a new home. But he understood something vital. He could survive. He could adapt, and he could even find unexpected joy along the way. As he stepped out onto the porch once more, Lena beside him, the sunlight catching her hair, he felt a quiet determination rising within him. The home he had lost would always exist in memory, but the life ahead, filled with choices, connections, and possibilities, was waiting to be written. And perhaps in that uncertain future, there was room for love, for friendship, and for new beginnings that were better than anything he had imagined. Ethan realized that some moments don't end neatly. Some losses don't come with answers. But those moments also create space for courage, for growth, and for the people who step in when everything else falls away. Lena had stepped in. She had offered comfort, understanding, and the quiet promise that he didn't have to face the world alone. And for Ethan, that promise was more powerful than any house, any childhood, or any plan he had ever held on to. It was a reminder that even in heartbreak, even in confusion, life could still hold something beautiful. He was willing to reach for it. He looked at Lena one last time that morning, a soft smile forming on his lips. She returned it, steady and patient, as if she had been waiting for this moment too. The day stretched before them, full of uncertainty. But Ethan felt ready, ready to take the first step, ready to face what came next. Because sometimes the people who stay are more important than the places we lose. And sometimes the hardest endings lead to the most unexpected beginnings. Ethan Walker had lost a home, but he hadn't lost himself. Not yet. And with Lena by his side, he knew that the future, even uncertain, even unknown, was still full of hope.